So we're moving on to our next panel. This is our Justice, Equity, Diversity, Inclusion panel. It's going to feature, today we're going to feature 3 panelists who are going to talk to us about preparing a diverse and inclusive workforce in fisheries and aquaculture and what that looks like. Once again, our moderator is Brenna Sweetman, who is a social scientist from NOAA's Office for Coastal Management. So without further ado, I think I'm going to turn it over to Brenna to kick us off.
Thank you, Mona. Good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. It is my pleasure to be back here on day 2 to moderate our second panel on justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. As Mona mentioned, today's focus is kind of exploring how to create a more diverse and inclusive workforce. We have 3 experts with us today who are all going to bring some very unique perspectives to our discussion. And we're going to follow a similar format to yesterday. So we'll start off with some opening remarks from each of our panelists. We'll have some pause to reflect on some questions, but again, encourage you all to please, ask questions through the chat. We really want to facilitate some dialogue as if we were all in the room together today. So with that, I will go ahead and just start by introducing our first speaker, Dr. Dion Hoskins-Brown with NOAA Fisheries and Savannah State University, is a scientist and educator who works with NOAA and university faculty to educate and train the next generation of marine scientists. Dion understands that the key to addressing our most pressing coastal issues relies on having a spectrum of stakeholders and diverse talent who can work together to generate the scientific information we need to make sound decisions. She believes in scholarship, mentorship, and service. After nearly 20 years as a scientist on loan from NOAA to Savannah State, she's developed an intricately interconnected research program that seamlessly connects fisheries ecology to fishing communities while engaging diverse students who will continue the work. So with that, without further ado, I will pass it over to you, Dion.
Thank you, Brenna. And like the professionals that we are, we have switched the order on you. So if you don't mind, can I invite you to introduce the other 2 panelists? And then Jennifer is going to start with opening comments, if that's okay.
Absolutely. Apologies there. So I will go ahead and transition to Jennifer, and let's see. So Jennifer, Dr. Jennifer Sweeney Tooks is an assistant professor of anthropology with Georgia Southern University. She's conducted anthropological research in the southeastern US, Georgia and South Carolina, and the Caribbean, Barbados, and US Virgin Islands since 2003. After completing a PhD in anthropology at Emory University, her postdoctoral training in environmental sciences investigated the potential for Georgia seafood producers to participate in active local foods movements. Her research focuses on seafood production and fishing communities, relating to mariculture, health, and well-being, and the cultural heritage of these populations. Tooks is a member of the South Atlantic Fishery Management Council, the socioeconomic panel, and on the executive board for the culture and agriculture section of the American Anthropological Association. In addition, she's an active in the Society for Applied Anthropology. All right, and with that, I will turn it over to you, Jennifer.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry we did that to you, Brenna, with no warning whatsoever. So yes, thank you so much. I'm really honored to be here. My name, as you just heard, is Jennifer Sweeney Tooks. I'm an anthropologist and soon to be associate professor at Georgia Southern University. And I'm really honored to be invited to be part of this series of JEDI panels this week and to be in the company you see here. I've been reading Dr. Hoskins-Brown's work for years, and it was really exciting to me to get to start to talk with her as we prepared for this panel. And so I'd like to just, as we discussed ahead of time, offer some context and some background and some big thoughts to set up what we'd like to talk about today. And I'm going to start off with anthropology. So as an anthropologist, I approach the world through a holistic lens. Cultural anthropology is the study of human culture across time and space. And that includes behaviors and beliefs and values and customs, foodways, livelihoods. And applied anthropology seeks to help with human problems. And this can range from things like obstacles that people encounter when they're trying to access medical treatment to examining the impact of fisheries regulation on commercial fishers. And so it's been a circuitous path for me from my native California, where I was an elementary school teacher, in Los Angeles, to fieldwork with Afro-Caribbean people in Barbados, to Emory University in Atlanta for a PhD and a postdoc, to my current work with commercial fishers in the Virgin Islands of St. Croix and St. Thomas, and right here in Georgia on the coast of Georgia and South Carolina. And in any place I land, I ask, what do I see here? How did this come to be here? What's the historical context? How do people live in this place, this time? Who's in charge and who's imposed upon? Who has access to resources? Who controls that access? And who is systematically excluded from those resources? Anthropology teaches us to ask big questions about equity and justice and inclusion and diversity, or the lack thereof. And it teaches us if we don't look at the larger forces that shape and constrain and influence people's lives, we don't understand the lives they're living. So there's really no way to understand the human experience without using this JEDI lens. And so here in the South, I spent a lot of time learning about the history of coastal communities and understanding the forces that have been at play here for a very long time. I've learned about the history of European immigrants who made their homes in Georgia. I've met people who hold King's grants that still give them rights to pieces of land in this state, which still kind of blows my mind. I've learned about the movement of people from the Caribbean to the Low Country, when many people came here from places like Barbados to the South, settling Charleston and elsewhere. I learned, of course, about the forced migration of so many people of African descent whose descendants live across Georgia, and many remain right here on the Barrier Islands in South Carolina and Georgia. And I've learned the history of the Gullah Geechee people who fished these waters for generation upon generation, learning from their fathers and their grandfathers. And in the course of that, I've learned about the systematic exclusion of people of color from commercial fishing, first oysters and then shrimp and finally blue crab over the 20th century were increasingly harvested by European Americans who came down from the north and were able to invest financially in boats and gear that could outcompete the labor-intensive methods that had been used for multiple generations. I learned about Harris Neck and how in 1942, numerous Gullah Geechee families were displaced from their land by the federal government for World War II purposes, with the promise that they could return after the war, and they're still waiting for that return. But exclusion and inequity are based on other factors as well, and various people and communities are excluded for differing reasons. And as I've conducted and supervised students conducting hundreds of hours of interviews with commercial fishers over the last 8 years, much of that generously funded by Georgia Sea Grant and Department of Natural Resources, Coastal Improvement Grants, Coastal Improvement Grants. Some common themes on that topic have come up over and over, and I'd like to highlight just a few of them here. Commercial fishers are deeply invested in the well-being of our coastal ecosystems. Their very livelihoods depend on it, but they feel they're frequently demonized. They see themselves as being blamed for the health of the oceans and for the biomass of the species that they depend on. Often fishers feel systematically excluded from real decision-making. They acknowledge that they're often invited to be on advisory boards or committees, but they don't see real impact of this work. And they perceive at times that their lack of a college education or their lack of an advanced degree means that their perspectives and their insights are disregarded. Fishers describe a devaluing of their profession. Commercial fishing is hard work, backbreaking, sweltering, slippery, stinky, serious, hard labor. And successful seafood production involves a deep ecological knowledge about the local environment or traditional ecological knowledge. And at the end of the day, they are feeding people. They're providing the very sustenance that keeps us alive. And yet they often feel they don't really receive recognition for the intensity of this work or for the value of their labor. So these are the sorts of topics that arise as I teach students about fishing communities in Georgia. And these are students that often have no experiences with coastal Georgia. Many of them are from Atlanta or other states or even other countries. And I often have to start with, did you know Georgia has a coast? And so these are the sorts of things that I taught the first 11 undergraduates that I took from Emory in Atlanta to cruise the mudflats in an oyster skiff off Sapelo Sound in 2015. And it's the sort of thing that we're teaching a group of 10 students that Brian Flick and I are preparing to conduct oral history research about shrimp boats this coming October, and the multiple groups of students in between, because I really believe that we need to understand the thick context of people's lived experiences in coastal Georgia. So as we're preparing our students, all of us, to be part of this next generation of the workforce, as Brian and I like to describe it, we're creating a group of allies in these students for the future of Georgia's coastal communities. So I share all of this to give you a really sweeping sense of the historical and cultural context of inclusion and exclusion, and equity and inequity, and the diversity and richness and complexity of the people who have lived and worked in Georgia for the last several hundred years. And I also hope that this gives you some relevant background to consider as we learn now from Dr. Hoskins-Brown and Mr. Howard during this session. So I'm going to wrap up and stop talking here and turn it over to you. But thank you for letting me ramble on. I had lots I had to say. I'm sorry.
That was awesome. I'm like, wow, I tried very hard to do this without imagery. And then when I started thinking about what I wanted to show around redlining, I was like, oh, it's not going to happen. But you're a rock star to get all that out in one breath. Brenna, would you like for me to go ahead?
Please.
Okay, so again, I cheated. So I made some slides and you have to let me screen share if you don't mind. But it's only like 5 slides. So I'm the peanut butter in the middle of this sandwich to kind of put into context where we're looking from a broader historical view to what the experience may be of a scholar working in this area. Okay, so I'm gonna reduce that down. Okay, do you see my blue screen, blue PowerPoint?
Yes, we do.
Wonderful, thank you. So Jennifer and Chris and I kind of wrestled with the idea of talking about diversity in the fisheries workforce because we had such broad thoughts, and we were like, well, how do we condense this and how do we make this a story that makes sense? And I think we've done a pretty decent job of doing that. I want to start off by saying that when I started looking at diversity, I immediately had to think of, 2 different sides of diversity. I thought about the statue, the bird girl from the book Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil. We have these 2 sides, and one is the academic side, and one is the non-academic side that Jennifer has given us some insight on. And I want to acknowledge, especially in this time of talking about inclusion, that there are many different types of diversity. There are several protected classes when you're talking about employment and hiring in the federal government that go beyond people of color. But for the purposes of what we're talking about right now, I'm talking about inclusion of people of color in fisheries communities. So are we talking about inclusion in an academic sense? Are we talking about inclusion in the industry or in a non-academic sense? The person on Sapelo who caught, all of these mullet and provided them, or for the McIntosh fishing family that has been working in the industry for generations. And one of the things that I think that we have to address is we have to acknowledge the presence of obstacles to participation. And if we're going to really increase diversity, we have to be able to acknowledge and move some of those obstacles out of the way. And one of the obstacles that we know about most clearly is having capital, being able to move into a profession and grow in that profession. And that wasn't something that was available to all for quite some time. And I'll talk about that in a moment. The other thing is, we're not even measuring diversity. So this is the commercial license, and I may get, whacked with a stick for, putting this on blast and putting it out there. But I was reminded today, I was like, oh, I need to pay for my recreational fishing license. I logged on and paid for my license. There's no questions there about my demographics. So I said, well, you know what? I don't think they collect this commercially. I know they didn't when I first started the African American Oral History Project. And I look at the license, and the only demographic information that is requested is gender. And, we measure what we value, and we can only improve if we take measurements. So why are we not collecting this information? And why is gender the only information that we want? And what are we doing to acknowledge that there's a need for diversity and that there is the presence of inequity? So here's what I want to talk about in terms of investment in fisheries related industries. And some of you may or may not be familiar with the process of redlining. And redlining was a process that developed in the Homeowners Loan Corporation, a government-sponsored organization that was created under the New Deal to expand lending opportunities in the U.S. under Roosevelt, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And the HOLC outlined areas in all communities that were most attractive for lending. And they put red lines around areas that were primarily African-American and defined them as definitely declining or hazardous. So this is downtown Savannah as it was in the 1940s. This is the red line map. If you were declining, it was because you were in a neighborhood that bordered a Black neighborhood, you were risky because of the threat, and this is the quote from the guidance language, threat of the infiltration of foreign-born Negro or lower grade populations. And it was hazardous where Blacks had already gotten in, and it was an undesirable population and were ineligible for Federal Housing Administration backing. So here's the thing, these loans didn't just apply to home loans, they also applied to business loans. And so this lack of investment in fisheries related businesses, fishermen who, they had the boat that they could build, they had the boat that they could fix. This is where this multi-generational lack of investment has occurred and why generational wealth is several generations behind in African-American communities. But we also have inequity in other parts of how we look at our coastal area. And I can't cite you chapter and verse, but I will tell you that there are people of color who have experiences with disproportionate treatment and enforcement of fisheries and coastal zone related matters. I talked to one former fisherman whose brother had a heck of a time trying to be a shellfish fisherman because there were so many concerns related to what he was trying to do in the area he was trying to do it and how that impacted other fishermen in that area and relationships that those fishermen had with higher ups. This example is a posting from the Sapelo Island Cultural and Revitalization Society webpage where they're protesting the approval of a private dock. Now, this dock has now been rerouted through the proper approval process, but it had not been routed through that process prior to uproar from the community. And so when we're talking about increasing diversity of the industry in the workforce, people who do everything from who sell retail seafood, wholesale seafood, ice, all of those different things that contribute to the industry, we have to recognize the obstacles that are there and do some things to address them. And we haven't even talked about the underground seafood economy that many of us experience in our neighborhoods as we see people who are selling and distributing seafood outside of the channels that are regularly monitored and managed. But in my last few minutes, I want to talk about one of the things that some people are listening to us to learn, and that is how to bring in underrepresented groups onto the academic side. And I have to tell you, I spent 10 years on the other side as a student being cultivated into being a marine science fisheries professional. And I've spent 20 years on the other side trying to do the same and to create and feed that pipeline of students. And some of it was, strongly pedagogical and built in structure and theory. And some of it was random and haphazard and just filled with good intent. And I certainly don't have the time to give you 20 years, 30 years of advice today. But what I'll say is, first off, what we do know is that it's very helpful if we avoid having our implicit bias around the low expectations around diverse individuals or assume underprivilege. Too many times we're recruiting diverse individuals, people of color, assuming that underrepresented in the field also means under-resourced. And that's not necessarily true. Some students are graduating from Title I schools, but some are not. Some are highly trained, coming out of a number of different organizations and very competitive schools that are just ready for the exposure and the opportunity to be trained in the work that we do. There are also successful program models from the NOAA Living Marine Resource Cooperative Science Center, in which Savannah State is a partner and that I help with, through the ASLO Multicultural Program, American Fisheries Society Hutton Scholars, now Black in Marine Science, Black Women in Eco-Evo and Marine Science, SACNES, AGU. There are lots of programs, new and emerging and new, and old and tried and true, that are resources to help. The other two things I will say are listen and communicate, and understand and hear what the student that you're working with is saying, receive them where they are, and help them get where they want to be. And the other thing, particularly in this time, is acknowledging mental health as a factor in student progress. I have seen this explosion of students who are really struggling with a number of issues around anxiety and performance and depression that affect what they're doing in the classroom, what they're doing in graduate school. And it's no less for students who are underrepresented, who are trying very hard to make sure that they're perfect and they're dotting every I and crossing every T, and possibly dealing with imposter syndrome. And so that's why I say it's really important to recruit as a mentor, listen, communicate, work with organizations with really high achieving young people like Jack and Jill, or other organizations that are working with young people that are interested in what we're trying to do to help us build that pipeline up. Thanks a lot. I'll stop sharing.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hoskins-Brown. I love that you were able to incorporate some visuals to really tell that story. That was perfect. All right, let's go ahead and hear from our third panelist, Chris Howard. So Chris is actually a graduate student, graduated from Thomas More University with an undergraduate degree in biology. He worked as an aquatic biologist in Cincinnati, Ohio, and a groundfish fisheries observer in Dutch Harbor, Alaska. He is currently a graduate student at Savannah State University in Dr. Hoskins-Brown's lab, and is working on his thesis titled "A BRD in the Hand: Understanding the Effect Terrapin Excluding Devices Have on Blue Crab Catch." He spent 2019 to 2020 as the Sea Grant State Fellow, working as the Sanctuary Program Specialist for Gray's Reef National Marine Sanctuary. Chris is also one of the co-organizers for Black in Marine Science, an organization created to amplify the voices of Black marine scientists. He's originally from Georgia and has always loved being outside in nature. On any given weekend, you can find him in his kayak or boat doing some fishing. All right, with that, I will turn it over to you, Chris.
Thanks for the introduction. It's been great talks from everybody so far. I'm gonna keep mine a little short and sweet, but I've done other panels like this in the past, and one of the questions that always kind of comes up is, what can we do to increase diversity, in the workplace, and like Jennifer and Dr. Hoskins talked about, in commercial fishing and things like that. And one of the things that at first I was like, I'm not really sure. I feel like the interest from, African Americans and other minorities is there in marine science. So it's not like there's a lack of interest, but I would say it's, just a lack of privilege, which is what kind of Dr. Hoskins alluded to sort of towards the end of our talk. And, that's a privilege that, I've been awarded also. My parents graduated from college, both with, advanced degrees. They were able to, be able to support me to do things like, those unpaid internships that are out there a lot. Like if you're, a student who doesn't have that luxury, you may have to work during the summer. You can't afford to, do free internships and kind of all that, labor out there without getting something back in return. Although you gain that experience, what are you going to do for, income during that time? And just kind of the exposure, and then a lot of minorities, although that's changing now, their parents, they may be the first one in their family to go to college. So if they have the ability, talent, to do something like marine science, it's more risky because I feel like there's a negative stigma that with marine science, you can't really make any money. There's not money out there in marine science. So if their families already making such a sacrifice to send them to college, they're not gonna why do something risky, you know, like marine science that you can't really be guaranteed to in a job? You may need, you know, additional schooling, you may need to, you know, go get your master's, PhD to kind of have a successful career in marine science. They're going to go, you know, into business or something like that, to where there's more of a guaranteed job, you know, within, after, you know, making that sacrifice for, say, their student school. And yeah, so, and then with that too, I feel like there's just a fear, I feel like, with minorities, with that same reason, you know, the children are, you know, kind of providing for the grandparents, the mothers, so they kind of want that thing, they kind of want that job they can get right out of college. You know, you feel like well, shit often trickle down, but it seems like some way in the minorities community kind of trickles up with the child feels as if they need to, you know, help take care of the grandmother or help take care of the parent, because they help put them through college or things like that, that they, you know, can't really push that forward at the beginning of their career, and kind of make some of those, take the time at the beginning to make those sort of more risky decisions with, you know, jobs or even degrees. And yeah, I think that's all I have to say. It's going to be, like I said, it was short and sweet.
Thank you so much, Chris, for sharing your perspective and story there. You know, it sounded like you all had a common theme of, you know, we need to start to think critically about, this is our path here, right? There's an ongoing commitment to incorporating more, a more inclusive workforce, and you know, how do we start to think innovatively about that? You know, I read a recent study that said that providing a more inclusive environment for employees, managers, whoever, and having a really diverse organization helps foster greater innovation. And I, you know, we know people are our greatest asset, and I really love hearing all of your perspectives. So at this time, you know, I will invite our audience to start to think about some questions for our panelists, but I'll go ahead and start, and kind of, you know, based off of all of the insights you all shared and each of your perspectives, what do you think is the biggest challenge that we need to overcome in terms of creating a more diverse workforce?
Well, you know, I'll start by saying that in addition to what you said about diversity increasing innovation, it also increases profits. University of South Florida, Luma College of Business had a diversity and inclusion certificate program that they just wrapped up last month. And one of the things that which I completed, and I thought it was wonderful. If you got a chance to take it, please take it. It's free. Is that, you know, companies that work on their justice, equity, diversity, inclusion make more money. And so it's not just a feel-good issue. It's not just a what you owe me or we should be nice to each other issue. It's about also moving the bottom line of companies forward, moving the productivity of agencies forward. I think and so that's my preface to the answer to your question. I think one obstacle is brain drain and not being able to bring in diverse individuals who want to come into your organization because they don't want to deal with foolishness. I'll give an example. Several friends of mine saw some solicitations that were coming out over the past 6 months from universities that were typically pretty closed to people of color, to professors of color. And, you know, I'm kind of the youngest in this group, and I'm 50. And so, you know, these are individuals that have accomplishments and can come into an organization as a mid to late year professional and really have something to offer. And we started forwarding some of those things to each other and kind of laugh. I'm like, I'm not going there. Like, I'm not going to go and experience that. I'm not going to go be isolated. I'm not going to go and, you know, try to, you know, prove myself again. I'm not gonna, you know, all the times that I wanted to go, and this is not me speaking, this is a collective voice of my friends that were going back and forth, all of us African-American marine scientists, looking at these solicitations saying, you know what, when I wanted to be there, you didn't want me. When I tried to collaborate with you, I couldn't get an answer to my email. And now you want to check your box and have a person of color. So I think one obstacle is getting the talent to come to you and making the change in the culture that you can get and retain that talent. So that's one angle that I would talk to that on.
Thank you so much for sharing that perspective. I think that is something that I have heard in my organization as well. I would like to invite Jennifer, Chris, do you have perspectives that you would like to share?
Do you want to go first, Chris?
Sure. I was just going to say, I completely agree. I mean, just conversations that I've had with other professionals, and then just thoughts I've thought myself. Like, it's always something that goes through my mind when I apply for something else, like, oh, like, am I going to be the only minority here or something like that? And it's kind of, it doesn't really bother me too much, but I can just conversation I've had with other people. It's something, you know, they really struggle with. And then just going with then undergrad, you know, that's a little story. I was the only, you know, African-American in our entire biology department the year I went in. And that's just things, and not like I said, I went to school up in Ohio. I'm from Georgia, so it was a new place. Just, you know, just things as simple as trying to go find a barbershop to get a haircut, you know. It's one of those things that's like, oh, like, who do I go ask for that, or just Google around or walk in somewhere, you know. It's just some of those sort of nuances that, or sometimes I feel like that are kind of forgotten, that maybe organizations wouldn't think about when they just have, you know, one minority kind of check that box in their facility.
And just to add to that, when you first asked the question, and I think that Dr. Hoskins-Brown really addressed this with a good example of it, but my first thought was that we're working against decades, if not centuries, of inequity and exclusion. So the thought that we can just, you know, put up a new job ad or say, well, I'd like to diversify my lab today, you know, that's really trite. You know, that there has to be a lot more effort and a lot more really deliberate thinking about how to prepare a place that would be welcoming and inviting and meet all the needs, from having colleagues who you could empathize with to, like Chris said, you know, just like daily life. Will this be a functional place for people who are not like the people who are already here? But it's a big job that needs to be taken on.
Yeah, and like you said, it's not something that can happen instantaneously, although it seems that everyone's ready to jump here.
It's overdue, but it can't be quick. It can't be a sudden decision that's implemented the next day, right? I mean, it's something that needs to be deliberately planned, but should have been done 20, 50, 70, you know, years ago. We're way behind the ball.
Yeah. So we do have a couple questions here in the chat that I would like to pose. So our first one, Dion, I've encountered student anxiety issues as well as imposter complex. Never heard that term before. In my experience, it is more common in students of color. Do you have any suggestions to address these issues?
Well, you know, it's something that I know that I have dealt with at different times, and I don't think there are any easy answers. I have a friend and colleague who's retired from a Fortune 500 company, and she wrote a book about it called The Empress Has No Clothes. And in that, it talks about the difference between imposter syndrome and basic anxiety based on the scientist, the psychiatrist that came up with it. And the difference is kind of like, anxiety is just anxiety, but imposter syndrome has status and rank and acceptance associated with it. Like, if I'm not performing at this level, then everyone's going to see that, oh, I never should have gotten to this PhD program, or I never should have gotten tenure. They're going to find me out, and, you know, it's going to be awful. I think that having conversations about it, and that's why I said listen and communicate. Listen to what your student or your colleague is telling you and try to hear it, because I think a lot of the chatter of the Buddhists call it the monkey mind, that chatter that's going on in the back of your head, as someone who's dealing with those kinds of anxieties, is really amplified because everything that that person is experiencing is either a reinforcement that they are absolutely an imposter, or it's a temporary reinforcement that, okay, I must be okay. I must have done a good job. I got, compliments on that PowerPoint. So I really think talking and communicating and helping students not feel isolated, particularly in the highly competitive environment of graduate school, where everybody is trying to demonstrate that they're brilliant and everybody is feigning that they're reading 20 papers a night, and that none of this vocabulary is new. And, I think everybody is pretending to be so excellent that it may be that you have students of color who feel okay sharing with you that they feel vulnerable in that way. And I think that is terrific. And that is the important part of mental health acknowledgement and maintenance that I was trying to get to. Because what I have found, and this is not just in students of color, this has been in all sorts of students, that they've got all this pressure, they don't communicate about it, and they start to implode because all of those anxieties are there. So anyway, I'm not a trained psychologist. I'm a woman that's got a couch in my office. That's it. And somebody comes and sit on it and they tell me what they think, and I'll give them the best that I have. But that's what I've seen.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that's a really interesting point, especially because it is Mental Health Awareness Month this month. And so, these are a lot of conversations we tend to shy away from in the scientific community. And yeah, I really appreciate your perspectives and insights on this. All right, we do have another question here in our chat. Even when BIPOC are given the opportunity, they are often still disadvantaged due to experiencing microaggressions. Can you address these various microaggressions, such as tone policing, colleagues weaponizing white tears, natural hair, etc., and how to resolve these issues? And so I will open it up to any of our panelists here.
I guess I want to ask my colleagues, Jennifer and Chris, Chris, have you experienced those microaggressions? Or Jennifer, as an anthropologist, do you have a position or a perspective on those kinds of behaviors in the workplace?
As someone who is very aware that these things happen, as someone who is really troubled by these things happening, absolutely. I mean, that's a reality that people experience. The last part of the question is throwing me each time I look at it, how to resolve these issues. Man, I wish I knew. I feel like you said, I'm not a psychiatrist, so I feel like I need to go to a training on that. How do we fix that? Except to call it out when we see it, to question it and to push back on it. I know that in my life, I do a lot of, I'm sorry, I don't think I understood what you meant when you said that. Could you clarify? But I would love some tips actually on good ways to resolve those issues and to prevent them from happening. That was a useless answer. I'm sorry, Dr. Hoskins-Brown, but
no, it wasn't. No, I think it's a real answer. I mean, and I truly don't know the answer. This newly minted DEI certificate recipient, me, that's what they said. They were like, call it out. If you're in a meeting and it's, all men and there's one woman and the woman is being talked over, which is a thing. It's a real thing. It's been studied. Look it up. If you are seeing that and you want to be a supporter in that room as one of the men in the room, you can say, oh, I believe Jill just said something like that. Or like when this is, one of the microaggressions, when someone else's idea is spoken by a man, but the woman said it and nobody acknowledged it, you can kind of redirect. So I think the answer to this person's question is to call out those microaggressions, to call out certainly inappropriate reference to appearance like natural hair. I mean, I happen to think natural hair is awesome, but it really should be a non-issue. And so if that is something that's on display in your experience, then that's something that probably needs to be called out. But I mean, Chris, have you experienced these kind of changes in tone, dismissals, other types of microaggressions in moving around in your space?
Yes, but thankfully it hasn't really been people that, I've worked with. That a lot of the different jobs that I've had is like public engagement is a big part of it. And I feel like it's more come from things like the public. For example, I was working with, the Ohio or Senko. There we do a lot of, we have this huge traveling tank we take around to show people about the different fish that are in their respective pools of the Ohio River. And I like to think I'm pretty good, with fish identification and stuff like that. And so people always come up like, oh, what's this? What's that? And I'll be like, oh, well, this is, paddlefish or quillback or something. And then often they look at like, the white person next to me like, oh, is that right? I'm like, eh. And most times, they come like, oh yeah, well, he knows what he's talking about. And it's just like, why? I mean, they wouldn't put me here if I didn't, know what I was doing or saying. So it's been a lot of things like that. Like I said, thankfully, in the workplace, I haven't really experienced anything like that or just been oblivious to it. But I've been, like I said, thankful in that way.
Thank you, Chris, for sharing that perspective. These are hard topics. It's complicated. I think just even the preliminary acknowledgement and talking about it is a good first step. I would like to, I think there was a question. I see Mona's question here. Could you provide examples of how to make our hiring and recruitment process more diverse and inclusive? Okay, so starting to hone in on hiring and recruitment.
So one of the things that the National Marine Fisheries Service is doing is intentionally diversifying hiring panels. And even that has some controversy with it because someone who is, can be visually associated with a minority group or a group that represents diversity may not want to be selected to be on that panel. I had a colleague who commented that they did not like that was going to be a new requirement that panels be diverse because that person did not want to be identified and invited to a panel based on what she looked like. And it was a great discussion because I did not feel the same way. I don't mind being engaged as a Black woman marine scientist, but I totally understood her view on that. So that's one approach, is diversify hiring panels. The other is to look for talent more broadly. I know that we try to partner with HBCUs, but I know of an example where one part of NOAA was really trying to recruit underrepresented minorities, and they were going to HBCUs and they thought that was terrific, but they were going to the wrong HBCUs. They weren't going to the ones that had really strong numbers in terms of graduates in research, ecology, marine science, fisheries, ocean science, biology that was not pre-med. They were going to the wrong schools. They were going to the schools that were like really known for political science. I mean, nobody's going to come to your table for what you're doing at that place. So being knowledgeable and intentional about where you are looking for talent and getting that information out to networks. And you really have to be persistent because there's a lot of information going out and a lot of people are looking for talented students like Chris. Like, I'm trying to keep Chris in a program and he's being pulled away by 2 other programs who just really want his talent. So everybody wants the talent that you want. So you have to be really persistent in recruiting. But I'm sure that Jennifer and Chris could also have recommendations on how to find, how to hire, how to recruit in an inclusive way.
Chris, do you want to go first?
You can go.
So when you asked this question, then I sort of thought of it as 2 different directions. One being students that I hire, because I do regularly hire undergrad and graduate students in my work, but then also thinking as a faculty member who's been on search committees and trying to hire other faculty at the university. So really to answer it from two totally different directions, when I hire students, I place a lot more emphasis on things that aren't necessarily their experience, right? Because I always think about sort of what Chris expressed earlier. Not everyone has a family that can fund them doing internships every summer or send them off to do these great, methods camps or whatever they are. So I really do look more at, someone who shows a work ethic or someone who shows interest. I mean, if you show me that you've washed dishes at the same restaurant for 3 summers in a row, like that person knows work, right? And they have a work ethic. And so they're not going to wimp out on me when they have to transcribe hundreds of hours of interviews. I'm looking more for the character and the personality that comes across and an interest. I would rather hire someone who I have to explain what anthropology is, or I have to explain this is how we do interviews, who's really interested in it, than someone who maybe can show me that they have those things on their resume, when they walk into college. And it's worked out very well. I've worked with some really stupendously wonderful people and a really diverse group of students. So far, knock on wood, it's worked out really well. As far as some looking in the university setting and looking at faculty hires, one of the popular ways to handle that now is to do cluster hires, knowing that this might not be a welcoming environment, like Chris mentioned earlier, or like Dr. Hoskins-Brown mentioned, this might not be a welcoming environment. So if we can gather a group of faculty, right? And maybe it's all around a cluster of something like diversity and inclusion in fisheries, right? Then you could hire someone in biology, and you could hire someone in the social sciences, and you can hire someone in a different program, a different discipline, but a way to provide a support network right off the bat, right? And that's one of those things that I think I was sort of thinking about at the edge of my mind earlier. That's kind of putting your money where your mouth is, right? Let's just not say that we want a token diversity hire, but show that we're actually willing to invest in increasing the diversity of our institution. Something that our university started doing just this year, which was really eye-opening, was that every job, every faculty application has to be accompanied by a 2-page DEI statement, diversity, excellence, and inclusion statement. And at first I thought, wow, that's new. I have never heard of this before. But reading those as a faculty person, knowing we want to hire someone who's increasing the diversity of our department, we know that we have a weak spot when it comes to some of these topics, and we would like to support someone here. Reading those, it was really easy then to winnow out people who really are interested in increasing the diversity of the discipline and thinking critically about these issues, and those who were paying lip service to that idea. So that was really, to me, an exciting way of trying to increase those sorts of opportunities in a new and unique way.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Chris, do you have anything to jump in at this point?
Yeah, I mean, they gave both 2 great suggestions. And kind of what that Hoskins was talking about a little bit with the kind of the diverse panel, hiring panel. I mean, it would give you, I know I would feel, a little more comfortable, I guess, in that setting. Being questioned would help me, give me a better interview, which could, help set me apart from other applicants. And I feel like being genuine, sort of like what Jennifer talked about too, in the hiring process. Like, even if you don't have the most diverse place, I feel like, you can always tell when someone just paying you lip service, like she said. You can tell when like diversity is something that's important to an organization. If they're just like, oh, we just need one of you guys in here just to check a box. I mean, you can really feel like how they talk and explain, and how when they say that diversity is important to us, this is what we're doing to, diversify and become more inclusive. You can feel that through the interview. So just being genuine, I feel like would go a long way. Feeling like you're coming into that welcoming environment.
Oh, thank you. Those are all great ideas for us to consider. And just to sort of follow up on that, there are a few, there was a question. I think we've kind of covered it in terms of, equity within the workplace. So I will see our next question here is, does or can USDA play a role in supporting Black watermen farming the coast as Black farmers are looking for federal compensation?
I hope Dr. Hoskins-Brown has an idea about this, because it's something I've been thinking about lately and I haven't had the time to dig into it yet, but they should. Do you know?
I do not know. And I'm with you. I think they should be able to, but I don't know. And I think it is worth digging into a conversation. So I might have to go sit at Dr. Erica's knee and kind of, brainstorm this out with her, because I think it's a wonderful way of thinking.
It actually, now that I say that, I mean, there's a little bit of overlap with a project that Brian Flick and Tom Bliss was the PI on a project about oyster aquaculture. And incidentally in that project, one of the oystermen we worked with was Ernest McIntosh, but it wasn't especially focused on supporting, Black farmers. But that might be a next step. And that was funded by USDA SARE. So we should probably look at that.
Yeah. And there's the SOAR program. I know the deadline just closed on Monday for the small awards for the Nature Conservancy pandemic related support for fishermen, which was a small grant that would go straight to the fishermen. But then there's a larger version of this grant, and I can't remember the acronym right now, that can be applied for by academic institutions and still, develop infrastructure and support for fishermen. So I think something along those lines is useful as well.
No, this is great. I mean, these are exciting concepts to consider, right? We're moving in new directions, thinking about these things that we previously didn't. And love hearing all of your perspectives. So we have another question here. So coming back to kind of thinking about how to include more students in developing our workforce. So for students who would like experience but can't necessarily afford to take unpaid internships or leave for the summer, what kind of opportunities would be the most attractive or beneficial? And so I think, Chris, as a student, you might have some perspective, but Jennifer and Dion, welcome your experience since you have worked with students for quite some time too.
I will say, there are, paid internships, which I know is what pretty much I almost exclusively applied to when I was an undergrad, just because, for that reason, although my parents could have, supported me, preferred, they didn't, because I knew it'd be a struggle for them. Like they could afford to, it'd be a strain for them to, send me somewhere else for, 3 months and work on it. So just looking for those paid internships, which is one of the things we do with Black and Marine Science. We have a job board on there where we pretty much only post paid internships and paid programs for, undergrad and at the undergrad and graduate level. And even some that are, for high school students that are getting ready to go into college. So just knowing, I guess, where to look for those sorts of resources to find opportunities that may be paid, and then just asking and maybe getting involved with some citizen science stuff that may not be as important for, that may not be as, not important, as intense, to where it's not such a rigid schedule. Like, oh, you can come in like after school or after this, only maybe a couple hours a week to do this work. So you still get sort of the training and experience, but you're not really expected to work, 40-hour week and, have all your time taken and not be able to sort of make any money from that.
Yeah, I would add, I think that's a great suggestion. And I really admire what Black and Marine Science is doing. Y'all got me on Twitter, because I was like on Twitter, but not using Twitter. And then when you guys started making all that noise, it really made me happy to see all of those faces in this profession and what everyone's doing. So I think that board is going to serve a lot of folks. I would say, I think there are some other options. Squeak and make noise and let people know that you're looking for an opportunity, and don't do it in April. If you, look in really as early as the fall as possible. I'm really trying to identify students, not, when we're not in a pandemic, I'm trying to identify students that are going to go to summer internships in December, November. I'm trying to kind of have that done before I go into the year, so that in January, I'm looking for their lodging. And Karina put that in the chat. She's like, housing where people need to stay. I want to be working on that as early as possible. So there are definitely funded opportunities through the programs that I mentioned when I was showing slides that have internships with housing. And here's the other thing that the COVID-19 pandemic has shared with us, and that is that it really is okay to do a virtual internship. So let's say you're not that person who's going to be able to go somewhere during the summer. Maybe you do have to work, but you want that research experience on your resume. So if you might be the person who needs to reach out to folks who may have data sets that are unmined, unanalyzed, that really need some work done on it, that you may be able to do during the academic year from where you are. Or you may be a student that wants to get that research experience during the semester while you're at your university, and maybe your summers are not available for a valid reason. So I say that let people know early if you're interested in summer opportunities, because there are fully funded opportunities out there. And if you're just thinking about it in February, you have already missed it. But if you want to get the training and experience and the competencies that employers and grad schools are going to be looking for, you can do that in more ways now than you could maybe a few years ago.
And if I can add to that too, from the professor side, I know we're talking more about how to find them, Chris, but when I got to Georgia Southern, I looked around and thought, oh, this is not the same student population that I encountered at Emory. And I can no longer use this model that they tended to use there, which was, oh, students can pay to do their own research. Students can go do internships. And so one of the first things we did, Brian Flick and I wrote a Georgia DNR Coastal Improvement Grant. And we asked DNR, hey, will you help us do this research and gather this data, but we'd like to train students in the process. And so they generously funded that, and they funded a second round of a similar project where we pay for the students to go and do these research experiences. And they're shorter. We do some of it on campus, and then we do some of it in person, but it's given for our students an opportunity for them to go out and do social science research without having to pay any housing, we cover their meals, we cover their transportation, their housing, everything. They just have to show up and want to do it. So, as professors, as faculty, as academics, it's something to think about. Yes, we can do it the way we're used to doing it, or we can find ways to fund students to get these research experiences. So yeah, big shout out to Georgia DNR, because they've been wonderful for helping us train more students and getting more students down to the coast.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much. We are coming up here on time, but I did want to just provide the opportunity. Are there any final remarks from any of our panelists?
I just want to say thank you for this opportunity and having this panel. Thank you for bringing in the voices that you've put together on the panels that I've seen, both on the research side and on this JEDI panel. And certainly, I think this came up in some previous discussions, but there's room for everyone to do this work. I don't have to be on this panel, and Jennifer doesn't have to be on this panel, doesn't have to be Chris. There's a whole, 58 people on this webinar that can contribute to making our workplaces and our academic institutions more inclusive. And it's an easier lift with everyone involved, and everyone has a slightly different perspective. So I hope that folks will leave these conversations encouraged and energized and engaged.
Couldn't have said it better. And on that note, thank you all for this fantastic panel today. To really appreciate all of your perspectives. I found this discussion incredibly energizing and insightful, and really, really appreciate your expertise and your time with us. With that, I will go ahead and pass it over to Mona to wrap us up.
Thank you so much, Brenna. I wanted to just say, Chris, we're so proud of you. Oh, we too want to have you back. Dion and Jennifer, thank you so much for your contributions to Marine Extension and Georgia Sea Grant, and Dion for your leadership in making us better as an organization. For those of you who do not know, Dion also is the chair of our advisory board. So we are inspired, and so thanks again for everything. Before I close out, once again, I do have a poem by one of my favorite authors. This is an Indian poet, writer, author, Rabindranath Tagore, and his poem is called Where the Mind is Without Fear. Where the mind is without fear and the head is held high, where knowledge is free, where the world has not been broken up into fragments by narrow domestic walls, where words come out from the depth of truth, where tireless striving stretches its arm towards perfection, where the clear stream of reason has not lost its way into the dreary desert sand of dead habit, where the mind is led forward by thee, into ever-widening thought and action, into that heaven of freedom, my Father, let my country awake. So with that, thank you all for your time, attention. We'll see you in the morning. Bye-bye.